Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement.
Stephen A. Smith was caught off guard by his co-host's abrupt departure. After more than 10 years as the face of First Take, Molly Qerim experienced a major setback behind the scenes. The owners of the network are incensed that she has now inked a huge new contract outside of ESPN. What actually occurred then? Let us dissect it. The unexpected departure that left everyone stunned. One of the most significant departures in the history of sports media, swiftly developed from what began as simply another Monday at ESPN's Bristol headquarters. Not even her longtime co-host, Stephen A. Smith, realized what was about to happen as Molly Qerim left the First Take studio on September the 15th, 2025. Molly Qerim has been skillfully mediating the contentious arguments between Stephen A. Smith and the First Take panel of analysts for the past 10 years on Monday, September 15th. She is in her element, maintaining the show with the professionalism and composure that have made her an essential part of ESPN's premier morning show. The debates are heated, the cameras are rolling, and everything appears to be going as usual. She probably went home thinking about the months-long contract negotiations, the low-ball offers, and the increasingly annoying talks with ESPN executives who did not seem to care about anyone but the woman who had made First Take a ratings powerhouse. She had no idea how completely her world would change by the time she woke up the following morning, because Austin Karp of the sports business newspaper released a shocking story that will alter everything that very night when Molly was asleep. Sources was the headline: Qerim, Molly quitting ESPN, initial take. All of a sudden, what was meant to be a confidential discussion between ESPN and Qerim became the main story in the sports media. According to the source, Qerim declined ESPN's offer of a renewal because her future goals did not align, highlighting her wish to move on after 10 years of moderating alongside Stephen A. Smith. Rather, Molly made a choice that would leave ESPN reeling and Stephen A. Smith looking totally unprepared on live television when she woke up on Tuesday morning and saw that her private company had been plastered all over every sports website in America. Instead of arriving at work on time, Molly made her own shocking announcement on Instagram. She said, "It is with a heavy heart that I will be departing ESPN and First Take with immediate effect," on her Instagram story at precisely 9 in the morning Eastern Time. "Grateful does not adequately describe my 10 amazing years here. My life was transformed by this show. Thank you for your love, fans. To your family, my staff, eager to see what comes next, with instant effect. Not at the end of the year, as the report that was leaked implied. Not after a decent farewell or a farewell tour. Suddenly, one of the calmest and most professional people in sports journalism had basically announced, 'I am done,' and turned down a multi-million-dollar contract. Social media blew up after the post received over 500,000 views in the first hour. As soon as #Molly Qerim became popular across the country, everyone wanted to know what they needed to do on Tuesday.
Molly Qerim, longtime host for ESPN's First Take, my day job, where she has been the last 10 years. Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement.
Suddenly, like a freight train, the word struck. There was no intention to go. This was not a mutual separation. Nobody anticipated Molly Qerim's abrupt resignation from one of the most sought-after hosting positions in sports journalism.
I have an idea? Of course I do. Am I going to share it with you? No. Because again, that's her story to tell.
Even though Stephen A.S. spoke slowly and deliberately, you could sense the perplexity and frustration in his eyes. Even this man, who had worked with Molly for 10 years, seems taken aback by the way and timing of her departure. In an attempt to control the narrative closer to December, ESPN officials, who were also apparently caught off guard by the early leak, frantically reacted internally. The timing of this added to its dramatic effect. We are talking about the heart of football season, when ESPN needs their best team on the field, when first-round ratings are at their highest, and when sports discussions are at their most intense. Rather, they discovered that their flagship show had a huge hole in it that they had no quick plan to close. In fact, the first episode without Molly had 750,000 viewers, a 15% year-over-year increase in ratings. #Molly Qerim received 2.5 million impressions in a matter of hours, with 60% of those expressing surprise at the sudden word reporting. ESPN refused to provide the answers that fans demanded. Qerim's current contract was slated to expire at the end of 2025, and contract negotiations had already begun as early as January of that year. What ought to have been ordinary renewal discussions had turned into something far more repulsive. As you can see, Molly was not just any host. She was the one who transformed a niche debate show into ESPN's top-rated morning show, which draws in over 600,000 viewers every day on average. However, ESPN's offer was offensive in spite of all of this achievement, despite being nominated for an Emmy, and despite being the steady hand that restrained Stephen A. Smith's bombast. While her co-host, Stephen A. Smith, was earning $20 million a year, the woman in question was earning an estimated $500,000. The ratio is 40-1. Give it some time to sink in. A 4-year contract with a basic salary of $700,000 to $850,000 with a 5% annual increase plus $200,000 in incentives was ESPN's final offer. That might sound like decent money to someone else. Molly had to spend 20% of her time on non-first take projects like women's sports panels or ESPN Plus films because the network wanted her to be adaptable. They aimed to keep her pay unrealistically low, spread her out over several projects, and weaken her star power. In addition to the monetary amount, sources said the offer was disrespectful. At the same time that ESPN was undercutting Molly, they were also announcing huge contracts for other players. ESPN fueled rumors that they had been preparing for Molly's departure all along when they announced a huge multi-year agreement for up-and-coming National Basketball Association reporter Malika Andrews on the same day her departure was made public. Therefore, it was the last straw when her contract predicament was made public by that Sports Business Journal article. Molly had endured months of vexing negotiations, lowball offers, and what appeared to be a concerted attempt to minimize her efforts. Everything became public, humiliating and unavoidable due to the leak.
She, Molly, put out a statement because there was a report on it, so it kind of got out of our respective controls once that.
You can hear the damage-controlling Burke Magnus, the president of programming at ESPN, as he explains what transpired. "The Sports Business Journal piece on Monday forced our hand," he later told The Athletic. "Beyond the first take, a clean split. Negotiations were not entirely in agreement on responsibilities. That is business jargon for we are trying to salvage all we can after we botched things up severely. The fact is, Molly's decision to leave was unexpected by ESPN. They believed they could trick her, coerce her into agreeing to their demands, and eventually win her over. They were mistaken. ESPN's poisonous culture was revealed by the power play. Now you would be missing the wider picture if you assumed that Molly Qerim's sudden departure was solely motivated by financial gain, because what followed would reveal ESPN's true power dynamics and the extent of the poisonous atmosphere that had developed behind the scenes. Enter Marcellus Wiley, a former ESPN anchor and current podcasting titan, who revealed an idea so shocking that it rocked the sports media landscape. Marcellus Wiley released a YouTube podcast 5 days after Molly's shocking departure, which would get 1.3 million views, and fundamentally alter the public's perception of what had actually transpired at ESPN. Molly Qerim did not simply give up. She performed one of the greatest power plays ever seen on television. He claimed that she felt constrained by Smith's enormous power at the network and had made the decision to make an unavoidable statement.
Stephen A. Smith as well, because remember, he's an executive producer on that show, and as he will always remind you, that's his show.
The tale becomes particularly interesting at this point because it exposes the intricate power structure that has grown up around Stephen A. Smith at ESPN. We are discussing a scenario where one individual has amassed such power that they effectively controlled the destiny of everyone in their vicinity, not simply a co-hosting connection. The current 5-year contract Stephen A. Smith has with ESPN is worth $105 million, with an extra $12 million from SiriusXM. His annual salary is approximately $40 million. As an executive producer, he has the power to decide who gets hired, who gets fired, and how much everyone else gets paid.
Just talked about that. recently about how Stephen A. Smith has that pull. Stephen A. Smith even talked about that when he checked Cam Newton recently, talking about, hey, I've hooked a lot of guys up with money.
Here's the opposite of that power, which he was referring to when he mentioned the well-known fact that Stephen A. had assisted in negotiating better terms for individuals like Ryan Clark, Dan Orlovsky, and Kendrick Perkins. You are stuck if Stephen A. does not stand up for you. And Molly experienced precisely that, in accordance with Wiley's idea.
Get the money if I sign off on it, or you can get what you want if I sign off on it. But the thing is,
this has startling ramifications. If Wiley is correct, Molly was effectively requiring her co-host's consent before making any major career advancements. In addition to haggling with ESPN management, consider yourself in that situation. Max Kellerman, who was fired in 2023, never had the same bond with Stephen A. that others did, but you helped turn a show into a huge hit. The ESPN power structure caused problems for Shannon Sharpe, who left for Fox Sports 1. This pattern implies that the network has given one individual an excessive amount of power, and it also exposed the relationship between her and Stephen A.
The thing she didn't mention was anybody by name, including Stephen A. Smith. Now, I've left a show or two before, and trust me, you're gonna name some names when you leave that. Just think about Shannon Sharpe when he left Undisputed. Goodness, it took about 10 minutes of all the names he dropped. That's my point. Molly didn't do that. So that lets you know already there's some friction behind it.
It is important to note that you anticipate some recognition when someone quits a show after 10 years, particularly if they have had a positive connection with their co-hosts. You anticipate receiving gratitude from those you have collaborated with. Molly thanked her supporters and referred to them as her team family in her Instagram post. But the embarrassment was not limited to one person. Take a look at Stephen A.'s on-air response to the announcement. Although he was professional and spoke well about Molly, there was a stiff quality to his speech that suggested this was not the cordial farewell he was attempting to convey.
Details, quite frankly, are none of y'all business. But it's not as if I know all the details. It was a contract negotiation that was going.
Continuing, it is none of your concern. Those are not the comments of someone who is grieving over the departure of a dear friend and co-worker. Those are the words of a defensive person, someone who is aware that there is more to the tale but is unwilling to discuss it. The truth is that Molly and Stephen A.'s relationship had been declining for a while, according to a number of people. According to production data, Qerim only received 15% to 20% of Smith's speaking time per episode, while Smith averaged 60.65%. She had been relegated to the job of a traffic cop overseeing Smith's monologues. Molly, I am talking here. An episode from 2024 in which Smith jokingly interrupted her in the middle of her sentence went viral, garnering 500,000 views on social media and igniting the hashtag #LetMollySpeak. Although it was intended to be lighthearted banter, there were more issues than just airtime. According to insiders, Smith frequently made decisions about guest reservations and segment selections without consulting Qerim at all. Smith's on-air comments regarding Qerim's eating habits, her personal life, and even her 2021 divorce from former NBA player Jalen Rose were perceived as lighthearted by some fans, who felt that she intended to influence the program's plot rather than merely referee it. According to a person close to Qerim, she privately voiced uneasiness over these comments, believing they compromised her authority. The leaked contract report, in Wiley's opinion, was merely the impetus behind Molly's successful execution of her grand scheme.
Why am I sitting in a situation that I know won't get better? Think about it. You too. Beat it up in the comments. Tell me your thoughts about it. But when you know you need to do something and you know it's best for you, what you waiting for? I think Molly woke up that morning, Tuesday morning, and said, what am I waiting for?
Wiley's hypothesis sparked an intense social media response. With more than 5,000 posts, #Molly's retaliation became viral, and 65% of fans concurred that she had not received enough credit at ESPN. Viewers who had observed the dynamics Wiley was describing left comments in droves. The subtle power disparities that were now hard to see, the way Molly appeared to be marginalized more and more, and the way Stephen A. dominated talks. This was about a network that had established a system where the enormous influence of one individual could make or break the careers of others. It was not simply about Molly and Stephen A.
So much about Shannon's situation, and as soon as Shannon went through that fire, he was the first one on air saying, come on, man, and talking on both sides because of the bosses. because he was in that.
Wiley was implying that Stephen A.S. had information and power that other hosts just did not have because he had access to executive choices. He had the authority to support or oppose the career advancement of his colleagues, was consulted on important issues, and was aware of personnel changes before they occurred. There are clear reasons why this type of power structure is problematic. It fosters an atmosphere where talented people are expected to win over their colleagues rather than just performing their tasks well. It implies that advancing in one's career is dependent on interpersonal relationships just as much as on performance on the job, which eventually results in the kind of circumstance Molly was in. Highly skilled, essential to the success of the play, it is also impossible to overlook the gender dynamics at play here. According to a 2025 Sports Media Watch analysis, female debate hosts received 35% less money and were subject to 30% more criticism than their male colleagues. This inequity was exemplified by Molly's circumstances. She played a crucial role in the success of Damage Control Mode. Burke Magnus promptly agreed to interviews with various media, stressing that this was just a mutual progression and that there was no controversy in the workplace. In actuality, ESPN had been trying to conceal something for years, but Molly Qerim's departure revealed everything. The bidding war that alters everything, costing millions of dollars. As if the story of Molly Qerim could not become any more dramatic, news broke around the sports media that would alter our preconceived notions about her leaving ESPN. Because while Stephen A. Smith was attempting to contain the damage and ESPN officials were frantically trying to justify her sudden departure, something unusual was taking place behind the scenes. A fierce bidding battle for Molly's services that would reveal how severely ESPN had misjudged one of its most valuable resources. Only 4 days after Molly's departure, the first bombshell was delivered, and it came from a surprising place. According to the U.S. Sun, Fox Sports made a huge offer that would make ESPN's lowball offer seem completely offensive. We are discussing a 3-year contract with a base salary of $2 million yearly, with bonuses that might increase her total income to between $2 and $3 million annually. I will give you some insight on that. In their final offer, ESPN had given Molly a maximum of $850,000 per year. As a starting point, Fox Sports was giving her more than twice that sum. This may result in a 400 to 50% boost in income for someone who had been earning about $500,000 at ESPN. It was the kind of offer that radically alters your career path in addition to improving your financial circumstances. Most significantly, it granted her host status with creative authority and veto power, something ESPN had declined to offer, authority over other panelists. Consider the implications of this. Despite being a crucial contributor to the popularity of the show, Molly was only allowed to perform the role of traffic officer during Stephen A. Smith's monologues at ESPN, receiving just 15% to 20% of the speaking time. Fox was giving her the opportunity to be the unquestioned star of her own shows, with the power to lead the discourse and influence the material. Particularly intriguing were the performance bonuses in the Fox agreement, which could reach $500,000 and were based on audience goals. These awards were given for surpassing ESPN's initial intake of certain categories, such as female viewers and viewers aged 18 to 49. Molly was not simply being hired by Fox. They were putting her in a position to directly challenge ESPN's dominance in the morning. With estimates ranging from $1.5 to $2 million for a 2-year tenure, National Media Corporation Sports was also apparently interested in her for a revived college football studio show, or Football Night in America. This bidding war is noteworthy because it exposed Molly's actual market value. She had been viewed by ESPN for years as a moderator who could be replaced, whose main responsibility was to mediate arguments between the show's actual stars. These were genuine, high-profile attempts to buy someone who was acknowledged as a real celebrity by the industry. Important information about how the industry saw ESPN's handling of the matter was also disclosed by the timing of these offers. Talent agencies and network executives began calling within hours after Molly's Instagram statement, realizing that ESPN had just committed one of the most significant personnel errors in the history of sports media. They reaffirmed their claim that this was a mutual evolution and that they had always honored her decision to leave. Instead of owning up to their error or trying to make a competitive counteroffer, The Athletic was told by Burke Magnus business. We respect Molly's decision for new horizons, and our conversations with her have progressed. The initial take remains vibrant thanks to the tryouts. That is corporate language for, despite the fact that we obviously misjudged her value, we are going to act as though this was always the plan. There is no greater striking contrast. The same individual was being offered multi-million-dollar deals and creative control over key programming by rival networks, while ESPN was holding auditions to replace someone they reportedly thought could be easily replaced. It was an uncommon degree of professional shame in the business world, and what transpired with the First Take's performance without Molly added to the embarrassment. Ratings remained stable at first, since viewers were interested in the story, but without her calming influence, the show started to suffer. Smith lowered his intensity in episodes with temporary hosts like Ryan Clark. Production logs indicate that there were 10% fewer interruptions, indicating that he was aware of how much he had depended on Molly's capacity to control his more explosive inclinations. Social media responses from fans were instructive. It was not merely a number. Molly's reality was the 2025 Sports Media Watch report that stated that women debate hosts made 35% less than men. Think about math. ESPN alone brings in over $20 million a year for Stephen A. Smith. Molly would be making $2 million annually if she were to receive even 10% of that sum, which is a fair demand for the co-host of a program that brings in over $100 million in advertising revenue annually. Rather, ESPN gave her a maximum offer of $850,000 and assumed she would be appreciative of the chance. In addition to collecting talent, they are directly challenging ESPN's morning domination by offering Molly a contract that would make her the face of their sports programming. They are placing a wager that viewers who enjoyed Molly's approach at ESPN will follow her to a different network, possibly displacing a sizable portion of First Take's viewership. Also, this tactic has precedent. Shannon Sharpe carried a reputation and a large following with him when he left ESPN to work on Fox Sports 1's Undisputed. Skip Bayless proved that personalities could move between networks with ease when he made the switch from ESPN to Fox Sports. Molly's circumstance is distinct, since she is not merely traveling. Rather, she is being positioned as the main character rather than the supporting one. It is a wise move that shows someone who is resolved not to undervalue themselves again after learning from observing how the sports media industry functions.